Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, your soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Some of the biggest heartbreaks don't come from people leaving. They come from what we kept allowing. Today we're going to talk about the most loving word you can say when your soul needs air and you need to be truthful. That is no. I'm back with another key to soul progress, and today that key is sacred boundaries. This episode is for anyone who has ever said yes while your whole body was screaming, no, 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 but you did it anyway and said yes. And it's for anyone who's tired of guilt running the show. For anyone who loves deeply but ends up drained, resentful, or quietly disappearing inside their own life. Let's make this clear from the start. A boundary is not a punishment. A boundary is not rejection. A boundary is not you being mean. A boundary is truth with love. From the spiritual teachings and perspective, there's a principle I want to plant in the ground today. Harmony is a protector. Not fake harmony, real harmony. Comes from alignment. Sacred boundaries protect harmony by protecting the heart. A protected heart can love clearly and cleanly, without bitterness. A boundary is an honest line that says, this is okay, this is not okay, this is what I need, this is what I'm not available for. A boundary is not a wall. A wall says, nobody gets in. A boundary says, love can come in with respect. A boundary is not control. Control tries to change the other person. A boundary changes what you will do. And here's a key truth for today. You don't set boundaries to change people. You set boundaries to stay aligned. That's soul progress. Now let's talk about the biggest problem that women have with setting boundaries. And men have it too, but we're going to focus on women today. And that is guilt. A lot of good people struggle with boundaries because they confuse guilt with doing something wrong. But guilt often means something else. Guilt can mean I'm breaking an old rule. Remember we talked about 2 episodes ago about changing old rules, old scripts, and transform them into new ones that are in alignment with your soul? Old rules that we're talking about here are like keeping the peace no matter what. Don't upset anyone. And if I say no, I'll be rejected. Love means sacrifice, even if it disappears. Those types of statements are not in attunement with your soul essence, the substance of your life. And that's why I want you to think about sacred boundaries. And what I mean by that is sacred boundaries are a soul upgrade. They ask you to stop living by old rules that were built for survival. So guilt is not always a stop sign. Sometimes guilt is the feeling you get when your soul says, "We're growing now." Here's a practical reframe for you to think about. Guilt is often the pain of leaving old patterns, not proof you're doing something wrong. And that's why boundaries are spiritual practice. They train you to choose truth even when your emotions beg for comfort. Ancient wisdom teaches that your life force is sacred. Where you place your attention, your time, your emotional energy, your life goes there. Wherever you put your attention will be your experience. So if you're constantly give your energy away, you don't just lose time, you lose alignment. And when alignment is lost, people often feel drained, confused, resentful, spiritually off, less connected to God, the Creator, the I Am Presence, and less connected to their own inner guidance. So here's the soul lens that you may want to see things through. Boundaries are not selfishness. They are not selfish. They are stewardship. And what I mean by stewardship is I will take care of what God entrusted to me. Your nervous system, your heart, your time, your body, your spirit. These are entrusted to you. Sacred boundaries keep your energy in right use, in right alignment to your spiritual nature, your higher source. And when you're in alignment, it creates harmony. When you're out of alignment because of guilt, for example, then you've now fallen off the beam. You're falling off that balance beam of walking life. Something to think about there. I have a story that might help you to understand this. And this relates to Carla, who feels as if I can't love you and still say no. And this happens in many romantic types of relationships. Let me tell you a little bit about Carla. Carla was dating a man called John. John could be warm and funny until he didn't get his way. If Carla couldn't see him last moment, John would say things like, "I guess you don't care." Or he'd go quiet and distant for a day. Carla felt anxious. She hated conflict. So she started rearranging her life to keep him happy. But even though she said yes more, she felt less loving. She felt tight, irritable, and tired. And then one night, John texted, "Come over now." Carla had already planned a quiet night for herself. Her body felt heavy just reading the message. Old Carla would have panicked and gone anyway, regardless of how she felt. But this time, she paused and she asked the question. We're training in helping prep more awareness around in this series. Am I about to protect myself from discomfort or serve truth? Truth was she needed rest. She didn't like being pressured. So she wrote back, calm and clear, I care about you. I'm not available tonight. Let's try for tomorrow. John responded with, wow, okay. Carla's heart started racing. Here came the guilt. The fear voice whispered, you're going to lose him. But Carla stayed steady. The next day, John tried again. I just feel like you don't prioritize me. Carla took a breath and said something new, something sacred. I do prioritize you, and I also prioritize my health and peace. Pressure doesn't bring me closer. Respect does. That boundary didn't attack him. It told the truth. Here's what happened next. John had a choice, grow up or act out. And at first he sulked. Carla didn't chase him. A week later, John apologized. And he said, I realize I do that. I push. Carla didn't shame him. She didn't lecture. She simply said, thank you. This is what I need if we're going to build something real. And what the soul lesson that Carla was garnering from this experience was self-respect. Because sacred boundaries teach your heart this. I can love you and still say no. And no can actually protect love from turning into resentment. Now I was thinking about giving you some type of tool that you could use in any relationship. And what I came up with was, I'm going to call it the boundary ladder. Think of it as levels. Again, I'm calling it the boundary ladder. Level 1 is soft boundary, gentle signal. Like, hey, I can't do that tonight. Level 2 is clear boundary, direct truth. And it might be something like, I'm not available for last minute plans, or I'm not available right now, but can do something tomorrow. Level 3 boundary is a firm boundary, repeating with strength. I've said no, please don't keep pushing. And that might feel fearful for setting these types of boundaries, but until you try to practice it with kindness, with firmness, and with awareness that the person may have different reactions to what you may say, you will never know where you are in setting boundaries. So again, level 3 is a firm boundary, repeating it with strength. I've said no, please don't keep pushing. And level 4 relates to consequence, not punishment, but a reality check. And it might be say something like, if this continues, I'm going to leave the conversation, take space. It may be leaving, walking, and getting your coat and leaving, or ending the conversation because it's not going anywhere. But the person is not willing to hear that particular boundary that you're setting or would like to have happen, or knowing that you may need to take some space. Please think about it, and we can talk again later. A lot of people skip levels and go from soft to explosion. Sacred boundaries move with clarity. They don't threaten. They don't beg. They simply state what is true. And here's a key spiritual lesson that might be helpful to reflect on. Love without truth becomes enabling. Truth without love becomes harshness. Sacred boundaries hold both. That allows for love and truth to be in the same space and centers you in your soul awareness and your Christic nature and your I am present in your Creator that you're anchored in your life. Let's talk about family, because this is where guilt gets loud. Let's talk about Mary. Mary's mother, Diana, called every day. And at first, Mary answered because she loved her mom, but the calls became long and heavy, and they resorted in complaints and worries and repeating stories. Have you ever had that happen? It may be a different family member or even a friend in which they get into this complaining and they get into this wanting to talk about what made them anxious and what stories that they had to go through, and they repeat themselves. And since it was her mother, Diana, who was doing this, she felt trapped because she didn't want to disrespect her mom. But then that trappedness began to feel resentment. She began to resent her mother because she was taking so much time and repeating herself. And then she started avoiding her mother, which made her feel guilty. This is common. No boundaries leads to resentment, leads to avoidance, leads to guilt. And guess what? The cycle repeats itself. And Mary finally said, I need a sacred boundary. She's been listening to my episodes. So she said, I need a sacred boundary here. She wanted to be aligned. So she used a clear boundary with love. And love becomes so important in how you set your boundaries, especially if you're walking a spiritual path and you want to set sacred boundaries. Love is always in that equation, because we can love people and maybe they're just not aware of their impact on us. So she said to her mom, Mom, I love you. I can't do daily long calls. I can talk twice a week for 30 minutes. And if you need more support, you can look at other options, and we can talk about other options that could be helpful to you. Guess what? Her mom got really, really quiet and said, So you don't care? And Mary felt the guilt rise like a wave. In fact, it felt like a tidal wave. But she remembered, guilt is not always truth. Just because we had that emotion of guilt, it may not be true to the situation that is in front of you. It's an old pattern, an old habit, an old script. Mary replied, I do care. And I'm also taking care of my life. This is what I can do with love. I can do the 30 minutes twice a week in a loving way for 30 minutes. And then her mother pouted for a while. And Mary held the kind line. She held what I've talked about in the past, an immaculate concept of sending love and peace to her mom. And something surprisingly happened after a few weeks. Their relationship improved. Mary was no longer resentful. And when she showed up, she was present, not sharp, not trapped, but present in her interactions with her mom. She didn't allow Diane's distance, but gave her mom space. She was clear that she had to set boundaries and that she did love her mom. She wasn't clear about what she needed to say, but it came to her. And when she said, I do care, and I'm also taking care of myself and my life, this is what I can do with love. Mary was learning right use of energy and being truthful to herself and trying to be truthful and honest with her mother. Because sacred boundaries are not about less love, not at all. They're about cleaner love. You might be thinking about, well, how do I make this shift from guilt to growth, growing through the experience that you find yourself in? And it's something that continues to follow a pattern that I want you to be mindful of. Here's how you make the shift from guilt showing up to now a centeredness in oneself showing up. Step 1, name the guilt. So you say, this is guilt. Step 2, ask what rule you're breaking. What old rule is being challenged? For example, don't disappoint anyone. Don't make them mad. If you say no, you're selfish. Those are common thoughts that come up in one's mind. Step number 3, place it with a soul rule. You're being centered in your own Christic nature, aware that you're walking a spiritual path, aware that you're trying to make forward movement in understanding and mastering yourself. So you can say something like, truth with love protects harmony. I can be kind and still be clear. I am responsible for my alignment. And step 4, repeat the boundary once. No over-explaining. A lot of people drown the boundary in explanations because they want permission. Sacred boundaries don't beg for permission. They speak truth. And a helpful line is, I understand you feel that way, and my answer is still no. Or my answer is still not at this time. Or my answer is still, I don't think I can do that. That line said in a calm way gives you calm power. Let's bring this into work. Mary had a coworker named Mark who always pushed deadlines on her. And Mark would say, can you just do this real quick? But real quick meant 2 hours. Mary didn't know what to do. She used to say yes because she didn't want conflict. But she was getting irritated. She started losing her patience, her peace, her inner peace. And Mary decided to set a sacred boundary because she knew that this irritability, this frustration, this anger, this feeling of being taken advantage of wasn't serving her. She understood about sacred boundaries. She meditated on what that meant in her life. She decided to set a sacred boundary. Next time Mark asked last minute, Mary said, I can't take that on today. If you need it by Friday, I can schedule it for Thursday afternoon. Mark replied, seriously? It'll take you 5 minutes. Mary stated calmly, I hear you. I still can't do it today. Mark got annoyed. Mary didn't explain for 10 minutes. She didn't defend. She didn't apologize for having a boundary. She simply held it. A week later, Mark adjusted. Why? Because Mary stopped training Mark to believe, pushing his work on her, that she would get it done. So the soul lesson here is Mary learned steadfastness, steadiness, because boundaries teach your nervous system, I am safe when I tell the truth. That's huge. And I thought, are there ways in which you can say things that be kind of scripted out a little bit? Yes, but you make it your own. That might be helpful in different areas, in romantic relationships and family interactions, friendships and work. Are there things you can say that will help you as you're thinking about and trying to set sacred boundaries? So in romantic types of relationships, you can say, I care about you and I'm not available for pressure. Or I'm open to talking, not to being pushed. In family matters, you may want to say, I love you. I'm not discussing that topic. Or I can do this much, and that's what I can offer with love. In friendships, you might say something like, I'm not available to be your only support. I care, and I need balance. There are other things that I also need my attention. Or I'm going to take space when conversations turn disrespectful. In friendships, they can happen that way too. Not just as much as in family relationships and romantic relationships or at work. Friendships, there can be some disrespect. Ultimately, you're willing to set sacred boundaries that respect you, respect the other person, and how the other person chooses to take it, you have no control over. But what about work? This is what you can say at work. I can do X by Friday, not today. Or, that's not in my scope. Who should we direct it to? Let's talk about that. What you're trying to do, ultimately, is have short, calm, clear statements that set sacred boundaries, that honor you in your development, your spiritual development. Know that the lens by which you're seeing things by is just not by the mundane, but you're looking at the conservation of energy that allows you to be anchored in a greater truth of your soul, the substance of your life, anchored in the Christic energy that flows and exists within you by the Creator, the I Am Presence. So let's kind of bring this all around. Sometimes love needs a warm presence and patience, and sometimes love needs a no. Not to push, but to protect. A sacred no protects you from resentment. A sacred no protects your relationships from unspoken bitterness and irritations. And a sacred no protects your soul from living out of alignment. This is what love looks like when it's practiced. This is where the soul grows, right in the middle of real life. So today's key to soul progress was sacred boundaries. Remember, you can be kind and still be clear. You can love and still say no. And guilt is not always a sign you're wrong. Sometimes it's a sign you're growing. So as we close, I would love to hear your thoughts. Ask yourself, where does love need a no in my life right now? Something to think about. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.